Greeting everyone. So we're going to talk about literature today. So it's a body of written word, the name that have been traditionally been applied to those imaginative work of poetry or poet, disconnected by the intents of the author and also perceived astronomically excellent of their exclusions. Literature may be classified according to a variety of systems, including language, national origins, historical period, genre, and subject matter. Eastern literature is marked by the unique Eastern culture, traditional philosophy, which have also been profoundly influenced the Western literature. Western literature, also known as European literature, is a literature written in context of Western culture in European language, as well as several geographically and also historically related language such as Bequins or Hungary, and it's shaped by a period in which it was conceived, which it period containing a prominent Western author, poem, or a piece of the literature. So we're going to, our member going to divide it into 6 members doing the Eastern literature and 7 members going to be doing the Western literature.
Similarities and differences. Similarities. They both aim at the same goal of apprehending truth and understanding the best way to live one's life, the purpose of human existence, and innate morality. And for the differences, the Eastern and Western fictional writing may not only differ in terms of writing method, but also differs based on the plot. Western fictional stories and novels mainly focus on a single character. However, Eastern authors make characters that depend upon teamwork.
Hello, my name is Colin Kung, and I'm going to be talking about a very well-known Eastern literature that was written back in 4 to 5,000 years ago, back in ancient China. So this literature is called The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and it was written by Mr. Lua Guangzhong. And I am going to be talking about 5 main points. First off, I'll be talking about what China was at the time. Afterwards, I'll talk about the general idea of the book, and following up by the summary of the story, and afterwards I'll talk about what the story conveys, mainly ancient propaganda, and lastly I'll point out the similarities between Western and Eastern literature. So to start off, I'll be talking about what China was like at the time. So about 4 to 5,000 years ago, China emerged as a sovereign entity with its own distinct culture and history. The path to establishing such a singular historical foundation was not always smooth. Indeed, periods of instability and internal fighting were common throughout the numerous dynasties and kingdoms. Stories and myths about these frequently massive fights were spread towards the populace, and eventually court intellectuals heard them and were inspired to make something new out of them. This is the case with Zhanghua Yang, which is the story Romance of the Three Kingdoms. That's the Chinese name for the book. One of the 4 classical Chinese works penned by Lua Guangzhong between the 13th and 14th century. So I'm going to be talking about some general ideas about the book. So the last years of the Han Dynasty and a period of turmoil and struggle between various warlords who divided China into 3 states, also known as the Three Kingdoms, are focus of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, a historical novel famously referred to as 70% history and 30% fiction. The restoration by the Western Jian Dynasty put an end to this. Official documents such as Chen Shuo's Sangguoji, published soon after the end of that time, served as one of Lua Guangzhong's primary sources, along with oral histories passed down the generations. The greatest power of the romance lies in the fact that stories from this time period have survived for over 1,000 years without being written. The people, the wars, and the events all read like they were produced by the greatest storytellers in human history. Because of this, the narrative spread across China and even to neighboring countries in East Asia, Japan, and Korea. Westerners sometimes make comparisons between the romance of Homer Iliad, but the Sanggua Yang Yi stands on its own in terms of information, intricacy, and effect on modern culture. The official name-bearing edition compiled in the 17th century by father and son Mao Lun and Mao Zhonggang consists of 120 chapters and 750,000 words. Previously, Lua Guangzhong had titled his work Common Stories of the Records of the Three Kingdoms. So now I'm going to be giving a brief summary of the story. So in 168 AD, corrupt eunuchs ran the Han Dynasty imperial court and prevented the emperor from enforcing his will until a Taoist cult led by the three brothers Xiang Jiao, Xiang Bao, and Xiang Liang claimed that the family of the Han had lost their right to the reign in 184 CE. An unparalleled famine ensued. They rebelled in the future, and the rebellion is what history remembers as the Yellow Turban Rebellion. After the imperial soldiers dispatched to put down their insurrection were quickly defeated. The court turned to local warlords for help. The Yellow Turbans exposed a serious problem with the government despite their attempt to overthrow it. The decreasing dominance of warlords at the expense of the government's central authority, the emperor passed away in AD 189, leaving behind just two young children as successors. Internal strife erupted in the place as factions formed in favor of each of their heirs, resulting in numerous deaths and exiles. In the end, a brutal warlord named Dong Zhuo, with the help of the greatest warrior Lu Bu, seized control in the capital city of Luoyang and installed the puppet emperor Liu Zhe, subsequently renamed Emperor Xian, on the throne. Other warlords in China held Dong Zhuo in high contempt, so they banded together to topple him and free the puppet emperor from his servitude. The heroes of this tale, including Cao Cao, Liu Bei, and Sun Jian, are among them. They helped pave the way of the establishment of the three kingdoms. Although the alliance weakened Dong Zhuo's grip on power, it was unable to bring the emperor back together, and the years between AD 190 and AD 122 were marked by hundreds of warlords fighting and betraying one another over territory and resources. Here we have accounts of massive wars involving tens of thousands of fighters, heroic showdowns, political intrigues worthy of Games of Thrones, and even a few love tales. Cao Cao in the year 220 AD was the most famous and influential warlord. Cao Pi, Cao Cao's son, crowned himself Emperor of Wei shortly after his father's death, thereby ending the 400-year-long Han Dynasty. This sets off the Three Kingdoms era when San Quan, Shan Xiangson, proclaims himself Emperor of Wu, and Liu Bei, a distant descendant of the royal line of Han, proclaims himself Emperor of the restorationist Shu Huan Dynasty. As the Three Kingdoms are established, the generational leadership begins to change as the original heroes and villains fall in war or through old age. Once the peace between the Three Kingdoms have been maintained for some time, the same ineptitude and corruption that brought down the Han Dynasty will inevitably spread. As a result, a new group begins to form within the Wei Kingdom. The most powerful of the three, Wei is overthrown, and the Jin Kingdom is established by Emperor's advisor, Sima Yi and his sons, first uniting all of China under the Jin dynasty. Their military prowess and ingenuity led them to conquer the Shu Han kingdom, and by 280 AD, the Wu kingdom as well. So what is conveyed in this story? So from my perspective, I think ancient propaganda is the main thing that is conveyed. The language utilized in the story served as specific purpose. It was meant to be used as a political tool, you could say. Specifically, the nascent Jin dynasty commissioned Chen Su to write records of the three kingdoms, and those records gave Cao Cao, the progenitor of the Wei state and a man of intelligence and virtue, a great deal of attention and acclaim. This occurred because of the Jin dynasty, having succeeded the Wei kingdom, felt the need to establish the veracity of their claim to the empire. Before the Yuan dynasty, Cao Cao was widely regarded as a hero. During this era, Luo Guangzhong penned the romance at court. The king of Shu Han, Liu Bei, and their realm were just what the emperor ordered to put some space between himself and the past. While Cao Cao was given the nod in official records, Liu Bei's side of the story was traditionally given more credit in mythology. This is because in the beginning of the story, despite being of royal lineage, Liu Bei sold straw sandals to make a living, and this poor condition caused him to look down upon by the other warlords. Near the end of the romance, when he is nearly an elderly man by the standards of that century, he finally achieves success after being ignored for most of his life. More than the other aristocratic, wealthy, and powerful warriors, the common people gravitated to him because he represented a societal salvation. So what are the main similarities between Eastern literatures like this, for example, comparing it to Western literature? So I have concluded there are 5 main similarities. First is character development. They have very similar development revolving around the protagonist. Secondly, the dialogue. Thirdly, the theme of the stories, what they try to teach, what they show. Fourth is the plot of the stories, how the story conveys, how the story goes on. And lastly, the emotions of each characters, how they portray all of those emotions. There's a quote by the author himself, Luo Guangzhong, that has captured my attention, which is, "Success is not worth rejoicing over. Failure is not worth grieving over. The world under heaven, after a long period of division, tends to unite. After a long period of union, tends to divide. This has been so nice, antiquity." Thank you for listening to my presentation.
Hello everyone, I'm Professor, and today I'm going to talk about Journey to the West. Journey to the West is a Chinese novel published in the 16th century and during the Ming Dynasty and attributed to Wu Qing'an. It is regarded as one of the greatest classic Chinese novels and has been described as arguably the most popular literary work in East Asia. The novel is an extant account of the legendary pilgrimage of Tang Dynasty Buddhist monk Xuanzang, who traveled to the Western region, Central Asia, and the Indian subcontinent to obtain Buddhist sacred texts and return after many trial and much suffering. The monk is referred to as Tang Xuanzang in the novel. The novel retains broad outline of Xuanzang's own account. Correct Tang record on the Western region, but adds the elements from folktale and the author invention. Gautama Buddha gave this task to the monk and provide him with 3 protectors who agreed to help him as an atonement for their sin. These disciples are Sun Wukong, Su Bajie, and Xia Wujing, together with the Dragon Prince who act as Tang Xuanzang State White House. the group of pilgrims journey toward the enlightenment by the power of virtue of cooperation. Journey to the West has strong root in Chinese folk religion, Chinese mythology, thoughts, and Buddhist theology. And Buddhist Bodhisattva, and are still reflective of some Chinese religious attitude today. Enduringly popular, the novel is at once a comic adventure story, humorous satire of Chinese bureaucracy, a source of spiritual insights, and extant allegory. Sun Wukong, the name given to the character by his teacher, the latter part of which mean awaken or emptiness in the Valley translation, aware of vacuity. He is often called the Monkey King. He is born on Flower Fruit Mountain from stone egg that form an accident rock created by coupling of heaven and earth. He first distinguished by himself by previously entering the water certain cave on the mountain for this feat. His monkey tribes give him the title of Handsome Monkey King. The monk Tan Zhangzhang, meaning a Tripitaka master of Tang, with Tang referring to Tang dynasty and Zhangzhang referring to Tripitaka, the main categories of text in Buddhist canon, which is also used as an honorific for some Buddhist monks. Is a Buddhist monk who had renounced his family to become a monk from childhood. He set off to Danzhou Kingdom and appealing for India in ancient China to retrieve original Buddhist scripture for China. Although he is helpless in defending himself, the Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara helped him by finding him powerful disciple who aid and protect him on his journey. In return, the disciples will receive enlightenment and forgiveness for their sins when the journey is done. Subache, literally pig of egg prohibition, is also known as Suwaneng or pig awakened to power and given the name pixie, monk pig, or just simply pig in English. Once an immortal who was marshal of heavenly canopy, commanding that 100,000 naval soldiers of the Milky Way. He drank too much during a celebration of the god and attempt to harass the moon goddess Chang'e, result in his banishment to the mortal world. So Wojing, Saint awakened to purity, given the name Freya, Saint or Sandy in English, was once a celestial Satan lifting general who stood in attendance by the Emperor Charot in the hall of miraculous mist. He was exiled from the mortal world and made to look like a monster because he accidentally smashed a crystal goblet belonging to the queen or mother of the West. During the preach banquet, composed of 100 chapters, the novel can divide into 3 major sections. The first seven chapters deal with the birth of a monkey from a stone egg and its acquisition of magic power. 5 chapters relate to the story of Sunzang, known as Tripitaka, and the origin of his mission to Western Paradise. The book of the novel recounts the 81 adventures that behold Tripitaka and his entourage of 3 animal spirits, the magical gift monkey, the slow-witted and clumsy pig, and the fish spirit Sandy, on their journey to India and culminates in their attainment of the sacred scrolls. This long section tells of Sunzang's journey to the west to recover the sacred Buddhist texts, recounting his many adventures along the way. Sunzang take the Silk Road, the famous trading route that connect China and India to reach the temple at Vulture Peak in India, where the scriptures are hidden. On the journey, the traveler encounter all manner of danger, including monsters, evil magicians, mountains of fire, and evil spirits. The four disciples proved their word by repeating, saving Xuanzang and allowing him to complete his journey. After many adventures, in which Sun Wukong and his allies defend Xuanzang from thief, robber, cannibals, van, foul priests, and monsters of all varieties. They reach India and everybody live happy ever after. For Monkey King, battle of all sorts of ghosts, monster, demon, and God along the way. In the end, he is granted Buddhahood and given the title of victorious fighting Buddha for protecting Tripitaka over the long journey. Sopache get the promotion as Arhat. Xuanzang become the Chantan Meteorist Buddha. San become Golden Body Lohan. And this novel teaches us that do not judge the book by its cover. The monster from the journey to the west act like a good being, but instead they are the villain and trying to attack or harm the monk. Determination leads to success. It is the reason that they complete the journey. Too much pride leads to failure. For example, Wukong has too much pride trying to be the best in heaven, but instead he failed. There will always be someone better than you, and do not underestimate your opponent. Do not do sin, or sin will fire back at you. Do not strive to achieve the great result or achievement without your contribution. Lepache, he has the worst promotion because he is always lazy, eat, and didn't do much during journey. And it also teach us that we should learn to forgive. And this is my reference. Thank you everyone for your time and your attention.
So greeting professor and my fellow classmates. So I'm going to talk about the tale of Jinji. So this is the table of content. We're going to talk about 5 main points, which is the introduction, the history of it, the facts, the purpose, value, and conclusions. So starting off, introducing the introduction of the story. So let's start off by introducing the author. This is written by Lady Murasaki, and also known as Mosaki Tsukubu. She was born in the 1923 or 1928, and she has died, possibly died around 1931. She was born to a Japan noble, which is a family called Fujiwara, in the capital city of Kyoto. She was an employee as a high-level lady in waiting, which basically means that it's a tutor or personal poetry for a princess at the higher court. So, which she was kindly asked for reading or writing in some entertaining tale. As we can see in the tale of Jinji, she appeared in the primary writing written for a female audience, Six in the City for the Day, or 50 Shades of Poetry. Murasaki is not her real name, especially mean like ceremonial purple. In fact, all the character in the tale of Jinji are called by their rank, not by their name. So it's make that will make you kind of confusing by reading the book, because their name is called by their rank, so it's not basically their real name. So moving on to the second point is who was Jinji. He was a prince, or the Shining One was the son of the empire, or his favorite consort, concubine. Because of Jinji have no power at the court, his brother is an heir to the throne, not him. And moving on, the brief summary of the story. So the tale of Jinji, central of the life is love of a handsome son. Hikaru Jinji, born to empire during the Hana period. In the story, the beloved consort contribution of the empire gave birth to Jinji, who and died soon after. Raised within the royal family, Jinji had his first affair with Fuiju Shubu, the youngest wife of the empire. She gave birth to a boy who was raised by an unknown empire as his own son. So, although feeling guilt because of the affair, Jinji still go on to numbers of human and have an affair with other court lady, including Mora Kaski and also Henny Sumo Sota, and also at one point Gigi is like in his adulthood with a lady of the opposite factor, result in which being a conflict for a period to somewhat after a short time he returned to a capital where he raised further instatement and position being appointed to the high offshore rank and raising the of his career. However, his newlywed young bride, Ona Samomiya, have an affair, the result in a child, Kiru, reminding Jinji of his own similar past action. Then Murasaki Noah, Jinji real love and wife, in fact, if not his in-law of more than 20 years, passed away. Left in deep disposition, Jinji decides to leave the capital to enter a small mountain temple. The tale of Jinji continue, although without the hero Jinji in the place are Kiro, his grandsons, and Neonomiya, Kiro friend. The two will carry on the Jinji tradition with the princess in the palace at Yui. The story centers of a young lady, Yuki Bona, whose heart and mind is set for flustered by the courtship of the two young men. So moving on, I'm going to tell you about the structure of the story, which is that it's composed of 54 chapters. The tale of Jinji is broadly divided into 3 sections, which is the first one is part of the 33 chapter concerning itself with the first half of Jinji life start with the chapter of Kiro Subutu ending the chapter with Fuji no Rabi. And for the second portrait, begin with the marriage of Ona Sanamiya and to a commander in the chapter Wakakana Part 1 and end with the chapter Mirak. And there's a chapter following that is entitled Hidden Behind the Cloud, which have no text. This chapter is not found in the title in the tale of Jinji. The third section starts with the chapter Neo, in which Karo play the majority role. In the end, with the chapter the Bridge of Dream, from the chapter to the Bridge of the Madams, and to end the shift with the story of Yuji City, and there's often calling the Yuji academics. So moving to our second point, the main point is the history. So the date of creation is in the Hanat period, which is last division of the classic Japanese history, running from the 794 to 1185. Is follow the Nara period, beginning with the Fifth Empire. Emperor Kenmo moving the capital of Japan to the modern Kyoto. For the Hanat culture, Hanat means peace in Japan. It's a period in Japan history when the Chinese influence, when war is declining, the natural culture mature. The Hanat period saw an engagement of new sets of school and Japan Buddhism. Although it's have a loss of political influence compared to the previous period, new Buddhism temple were built across the nation in an attempt to spread a new type of Buddhism. And for the third one is about facts. The basic fact, the tale of Jinji have been considered as the world's first ever novel written as 1,000 years old by a female author, Shikibu Marukashi. It's also that established during the middle of the Hana period. The first copy was found in 9908. Any kind of literature back then was copied by hand, so it's hard to point out which is original copy. Also, the story is about a rise and fall and a very dramatic love story of the royal called Haikaru Jinji. So moving on to our fourth point, the value and the purpose. So the first one is the purpose. At its most basic, the tale of Shinji is an absorbing introduction to a culture of aristocracy in early hence Japan. Its form of entertainment and a manner of dress, a daily life, and a moral code. And moving on to another point is the value. The tale of Shinji have a huge impact on developing of Japan culture, including literature, art, craft, and the development and form of art, and provided theater material for a division work and pursued as a filter screen, picture scroll, and in stage ceremony and kabuki. It have been translated into 20 foreign language, including English, Chinese, and it's read by people around the world. So in conclusion, the tale of Shinji tends to reveal the suffer and horrific experience of women and the male authority. For me, as a woman, I believe from pursuing high school education show in the act of defense, I enrolled myself in the flooding school as Miranda Carey. So you have to show them our power as a woman. Thank you.
So good afternoon, Professor, as well as all the audience that is watching this video. So our topic today, we're gonna do a literature review about Ramayana and to see how it would affect our life in the humanity way. So in this specific topic, I'm gonna bring up 3 things that Ramayana taught us about humanity. The first one would be unity in diversity is possible and necessary. The second one is value your support system. And last but not least, powerful woman. And to have a better understanding about this topic that I will be talk about later, I would like you guys to take a listen about the summary of the Ramayana story so that it will be more easy for us to understand about the topic that we will be cover. So the ancient epic Ramayana is a beautiful Sanskrit story of love and sacrifice, courage and duty, and triumph of good over evil. Originally composed by the sage Valmiki around 500 before century to 100 before century. The story is considered one of the greatest literature work of ancient India and has subsequently inspired many diverse regional versions of throughout India and South Asia in the form of poetic, narrative, art, drama, and dance. The tale center around Rama, the elder son of Dasarath king of Ayodhya, and Sita, daughter of King Janaka of Videha, each of whom are an incarnation of Vishnu and Lakshmi, respectively. After Rama wins the princess' hand in marriage, his stepmother, Kaikeyi, under the coercion of her maid, conspired to depose him and claim the throne for her sons, Bharata, Rama's half-brothers. The years passed peacefully as Rama and Sita and Lakshmana adjust to their simple aesthetic life in the forest, during which time Sita is abducted by Ravana, the demon king of Lanka, and imprisoned in his palace gardens. A heartbroken Rama enlists to help the Sugriva, ruler of the Vanaras, a monkey race created by Lord Brahma, to help the prince in his quest to find his beloved wife. Eventually, she is found by Hanuman, a monkey man bestowed with godlike power of strength, size, and speed, whom informed Rama of her whereabouts, returning with a celestial jewel taken from Sita's hair as proof. With the help of his army of powerful monkey and bear, Rama built a bridge across the ocean to attack Lanka. A long bloody battle followed between Rama's allies and the Rakshasas, leading to Ravana eventually death and Sita rescue. Before Rama will accept Sita as his wife, he asked that she prove her purity by undergoing an ordeal of fire. Vindicated by the fire god himself, Agni, the couple are joyfully reunited and return to Ayodhya to be crowned king and queens, inaugurating a golden age of peace and prosperity for all but Sita. When she falls pregnant, a short time later, gossip began to circulate, raising speculation about her chastity and devotion to Rama regarding her time living with Ravana in Lanka. Though Rama knows she is innocent but in order to prevent discord amongst his people, he decided to send her away to live in sage Valmiki's ashram, where she gives birth to twin boys and bring them up alone. When a grief-stricken Rama is finally reunited with his family many years later, Sita, out of love for her husband, chose to sacrifice her life to ensure his divine reputation remain untarnished and is swallowed by the Mother Earth. So throughout this story, each part had a specific meaning in order for us reader to learn about the humanity based on the story. So to prove that, I will point out three specific events that had happened in the story to explain furthermore how it taught us about humanity, thus how it will apply to our daily life. So now we're going to talk about the first part. Unity is diversity is possible and necessary. When Lord Rama set out to defeat Ravana, he was not alone. Even though he was exiled, he had his people's support. The gods stood with him too. The famous Vanarasna, led by Sugriva and Hanuman, were by his side. This support and unity are what made it possible for Lord Rama to reach Lanka and defeat Ravana. In today's world, it might seem impossible for people from different backgrounds to come together and help each other. But as we know that currently Russia and Ukraine are in the verge of war right now, so it is the time that we should consider to stand with one and another to help each other. The Ramayana teaches us that not only is it possible, but it is also necessary to ensure victory over evil force. And now let's move to the second part, which is value your support system. So when Lord Rama has banished into exile, his brother Lakshman chose to give up the luxuries of life as a prince and stand by his brother. Similarly, Bharat stayed back but did not accept the position of kings, choosing to rule in Lord Rama's stead as he waited for his brother to come home. The people that surround, what this taught us is that the people that surround you are your biggest strength. So in this life, it wasn't meant that you need to live alone. And what it means is by seek help when you need it and value the people in your life. And the last part of the presentation is powerful woman. In this story, Sita is a fully devoted wife and companion who is always ready to serve her husband all the times. She evoked curiosity in the minds of the readers. Sometimes she is regarded submissive, and sometimes she seems to be an assertive woman. But it is generally regarded that Sita has a very strong and bold characters. Sita's devotion toward Rama has been questioned and discussed widely by feminists. They criticize her for submissive nature, but if one observes the character, you will realize that Sita has her own individuality and she maintained her self-respect and dignity throughout, and that too without moving away from the path of Dharma. Sita tends to serve as a role model for women, carries out all the duties, yet she maintained her self-respect. And in conclusion, we learn that the Ramayana is a masterpiece connecting and link between ancient times and modern times, as the philosophy it preaches is still relevant and will be relevant in the upcoming ages, as it deals with the sociological and spiritual aspect. And that is all of my presentation. And here are the reference to all the information that I found for this specific topic.
Hi, my name is Peng, and I'm going to talk about Rumi, which is the most known as the greatest of the poet in the 17th century. So, while most known Rumi by his single word moniker, his full name was Jalal al-Din Muhammad Rumi, and he also known as a Jalal al-Din Muhammad Balkhi. Some people also knew Rumi by the single words Malawi or Malawi, and he was born in 1207 in what is known as Afghanistan, and he produced a poetry throughout his 66 years that stood the test of times, and his poems have been translated into countless languages worldwide, and he is considered the most famous poet of all the times in many areas. So, while most of the author work written in the Persian language, he also wrote in Greek, Arabic, Turkish, and Kanya. Many of Rumi's poems are read in the original form in Iran and other Persian-speaking areas. Translations of Rumi's work are most popular in South Asia, the American, Azerbaijan, and Turkey. Rumi's poetry has heavily influenced literature in many other areas of the world. So, a little bit background about Rumi. Rumi came from a family of Islamic preachers and was influenced by his father. Following his family's immigrations to Baghdad, and Rumi performed the Mecca pilgrimage after meeting Sufis and scholars on his travel. And after completing his pilgrimage, he traveled to Damascus, where he spent 4 years meeting with scholars and working to find his life path. So while in Damascus, he met Shami Tabrizi in 1244. So legends has it that Shams traveled searching for a friend, and when he met Rumi, the two developed a deep, lasting bond. He agreed to the gods to give his head in exchange for a friend 4 years after Shams and Rumi met. Shams met his death at the hands of Alauddin, which is Rumi's son. And many of Rumi's work are based on his grief for his lost friend. So there are some of Rumi's famous poems and has been translated into English. So about the Rumi's poem, Rumi's poetries explore themes of love, life, religions, spiritualities, and the belief that no human being is perfect, that all humans need to find their purpose in higher power, and that is can take some time and work to figure out exactly how this play out in real life. Rumi's poetry has a timeless quality, as it explores themes that have not changed throughout history and remain pertinent to human life today. So as a result, Rumi's words are often read at wedding or funeral, as they present poignant ideas about how people interact with one another both on earth and in the afterlife. So Rumi's poem taught his knowledge and view as a mystic, and often touching on timeless thoughts such as life, love, eternity, and forgiveness. So in addition, Rumi's work show his ability to serve as a theologian, presence poet, and Sufi mystic, and more. So there are some of his famous poems that I'm going to show. So first one, which is the I am thin and thou art mine. Eternal life is gained by utter abandonment of one's own life. When God appears to his other lovers, the lover is absorbed in him, and not so much as a hair of the lovers remains. True lovers are as shadows, and when the sun shines its glory, the shadows vanish away. This poem means that Rumi's thought on eternity comfort many during his times and continue to bring comfort to both people of Islam and other faith today. And Rumi shares how vanishing from the earth is not harmful process in this poem. Instead, the process can be viewed as a reabsorption by God, rather than the image of a person dissolving away after that. Rumi presents the image of someone being welcomed back into God's environment, and one hair at a time. The second poem is a prayer. So, prayer in this wise and allay your difficulties. Give us good in the house of our present world, and give us good in the house of our next world. So the explanations of the poems is that Hosea born, Rumi shares his view on life after death regularly. And many of his poems take the forms of prayers. Reciting or reading Rumi's prayer-centered poems has helped readers feel close to the higher power, whether they study the Bible, the Quran, or another religion's text. The third poem is Love Sounds, the music of spirits. The world is God-fueled, mirror clear, to eyes when free from cloud within. With love's own eye the mirror view, and there see God to save again. And it means that Rumi shares how he found beauty all around him and found the world an extension of all that God has to offer. And the poet often shares how the world's beauty could be found anywhere if only people would take the time to look around and appreciate it. And Rumi encouraged readers to search around them for the little things that make life beautiful, all while remembering that we are surrounded by God's work and need to appreciate how our world mirrors His. And the fourth poem is just Though and Night. Joyful and secure from foolish bubble, though and night. All the bright plump birds of heaven will devour their hearts with envy. In the place where we show love in such a fashion, though and night. This is the greatest wonder, that though and night, sitting here in the same nook. At this moment, both in Iraq or Khorasan, though and night. The explanations for these poems is that love-based poems were a favorite of Rumi's, and he often touched on how the little things are often what make a relationship great. So, for example, like rather than talking about large, extravagant gestures, Rumi discussed how small gestures make it a relationship worthwhile. And here, Rumi also touched on how simply sitting with a loved one can be more exciting than a seemingly more engaging experience, and how this feeling with a loved one can be challenging for outsider to understand. The fifth one is about the gift of the beloved. So where will you find one more liberal than God? He buys the worthless rubbish, which is your wealth. He pays you the light, illumine your heart. It means that forgiveness is a complex topic for many people. So Rumi often discuss how God's liberal attitude toward forgiveness and could serve as an example for people to forgive others without holding grudges or resentment against them. So in both the Quran and the Bible, God is presented as a loving, non-violent figure. So Rumi wants people to realize that they were not above God. And if God found that ability to forgive people who were always learning and doing wrong, people could also find it in their heart to forgive others who have wronged them. The last one that I got is the silence of love. And when we fall in love, we are ashamed of our words. Explanation by the tongues make most things clear, but love unexplained is better. It could be explained that any human being who has been in love has experienced difficulty and nervousness and anxiety that can come with the expression, especially seeing the way you feel to your objects of affection. And can be challenging to put love into prose, and often we feel that we fall short of expressing ourselves when we try. And Rumi discussed how sometimes silence is love. It's just expressive as word. In conclusions, Rumi's poetry discussed love, life, and forgiveness, and it's useful in encouraging people that they will not be disappointed in life. And his poems is great, and it could be used to since it has been translated into many languages. So a lot of people, more and more people could be comforted and inspired by his lyric. Thanks.
Hello everyone, my name is Kai Webot, and today I'm going to talk about a very famous literature from the Middle East. So this literature is called 1001 Nights or Arabian Nights. It is a very famous literature known all over the world. There are a lot of translation as well as adaptation of this literature Before jumping into the discussion about the literature, let us first look at the table of content. The first thing that we are gonna discuss about is the background, the character review, adaptation and vision. Next is influence, and lastly, contribution. Now let us talk a bit about the background of the story. This story was written during the 750 AD, and the timeline of the story was set around the earlier medieval era. And the story was originated from Persian, set in the Persian kingdom. It was very widely known around the globe. The 1001 Night is basically a collection of Persian, Indian, and Arabian folktale. Stories including in this literature are naming a few famous ones are Ali Baba, Samba the Sailor, and Aladdin. And there are two main characters in the story. One is the Sultan or the king. His name is Shahryar, and the daughter of the king vizier or the storyteller, which is Shahrazad. And a short summary of this story. So it begins in a Persian country. There was a king named Shahryar. One day, the king found out that his queen was being unfaithful to him. She cheated on him with his guard. The king got mad and heartbroken by this, and he ordered his queen to be executed, and he made a new rule, deeming all the women in the kingdom to be like her, and they must marry him during the night and be killed the next morning. The kingdom was very shocked and dissatisfied with the king's new law, but they cannot do anything and only look at their daughter being killed. And as time moved on, the kingdom eventually started to run out of women, and the daughter of the king vizier convinced her father to offer her to the king to be his bride for the night. During the night of the marriage, the daughter of the vizier, Shahrazad, she asked the king for her sister to be by her side until the next morning. The king granted her wishes. And during the night, Shahrazad asked her sister to ask her to tell stories during the next morning. Until sunrise, her sister did as she commanded, and she told stories to her sister, and the king also were also there to listen to her story. The king was captivated by her stories that she had told and left by a cliffhanger, meaning she have only told part of the story, leaving the other part to be told tomorrow. The king enjoyed it, and he allowed Shahrazad to live until the next day to tell the story. And during the next day, she told the story again and jumped into another story. And this continued on for about 1001 Night, which gave the story its name. During that time, she told a lot of story from many genre and different types of dramas, including romance, exotic, action, life drama, and so on. And at the end, the king eventually fall in love with her, and he changed his fear and anxiety of women, and also lifted the rule of the bride marrying. After being familiarized with the background of the story, we are gonna look at the character of the story. The main protagonist of the story is the daughter of the advisor or the storyteller, which is Shahrazad. Shahrazad was an amazing character of literature. She was one of the first feminine hero to be mentioned in a literature. And she was also a very intelligent woman. She was an intellectual. She have read and studied many type of literature, including philosophy and medicine. And she had also read and written a lot of literature too. And from an outsider point of view, we can say that Shahrazad is a very important person. Without her, the kingdom would fall into chaos, as well as there might be a civil war between the people and the king due to the bride marrying rules. Shahrazad was able to tame the king by telling him stories every night, as well as serving her own life. We can say that she was a peacemaker because she was able to bring back peace and equality into the kingdom. And now let's look at how this literature influenced the world. This 1001 Night, or the Arabian Night, is basically a collection of stories of uncertain origin. It is mostly considered to be a national trove of literary styles and genre, inspiring many generations of artists. And the first person to brought the story to the European side, or the West side, is Antonian Galen. He was the one who translated the literature and brought it to Europe. And since then, there have been many frameworks as well as rewritten of the story, adding in new stories such as the Aladdin, Sinbad, and Ali Baba, which we have all known. And this literature have been also adapted into many forms of arts, opera, drama, classical, as well as games. The story of 1001 have been very, we can say, influential in our world. It has brought a lot of culture, ideal concept, as well as humanity to the other part of the world, especially the West side. Now let us look at the adaptation as well as different versions of the stories that are being frameworked as well as rewritten. So the first one is by Al-Mudi during the early century. It was written in Arabian language, or translated in Arabian language. And next is during the 18th century by Antonian Galen. He rewrote it into French. And then during the 19th century by Sir Richard Burton in English. And later it was famously distributed across the world and being translated into a lot of languages until this modern day. The 1001 Night literature is mostly regarded as one of the greatest Arabic, Middle Eastern, as well as Islamic contribution to the world. It has greatly contributed to the world in forms of literature, music, art, and cinema. It still continues to do so until this day. The story tells us comes in a wide variety of genre, including adventure, mysterious, love, drama, comedy, tragedy, as well as horror story, poems, and erotic stories. And as I have previously mentioned it, the tales themselves combine with many genres, and they are drawn from a very rich inherited folkloric tradition of the entire Middle Eastern region. The story combines magical, mystical, as well as mythical and historical stories too. This literature also shows us a very old tradition of our humankind, which is the oral tradition of storytelling. It is a tradition in which we tell story from one people to another, or from one generation to another generation. And if we look at the story itself, it is a big collection of other small stories in it. And in each story, it shows us a lot of humanity in form of drama, action, love, romance, and betrayal, sadness, happiness, and other forms of feelings too. And the story, in overall, the story really contribute to humankind, because as we know, even in the Hollywood, from the Hollywood movies to small comics, it is mostly influenced by this literature. Big movies such as the Aladdin from Disney and Hollywood are all adapted from this literature, as well as to small comics such as from a DC Comics. One of the Green Lantern episode featured a episode that is updated from the story, which is called the Emerald 1001 Night. And this will conclude my discussion about this literature. I think it is a very good literature filled with many diverse genres, as well as humanity that we can all learn from it. I highly recommend this literature, and this is my reference. Thank you all for listening to my presentation.
Hello everyone, and hello Professor. My name is Petra, and today I'm going to talk about Virgil from Western literature. So here is the content I'm going to talk about throughout my presentation. So let's get started. So Virgil was an Italian humanist scholar, historian, priest, and diplomat who spent much of his life in England. Virgil was regarded by the Romans as their greatest poet. He was born in a farming village of Andes near Mantua, north of the Po River in northern Italy on October 15, 70 before Christ. According to the traditions, Virgil died in Brundisium Harbor on 21st September 19 before Christ. Because he was traveling to Greece in order to revise his work, and caught a fever and soon got weakened by the disease. Let's talk about Virgil's educational background. Virgil attended school in Cremona, then briefly in Milan in 54 or 53 before Christ. He went to Rome, where he studied law and rhetoric in school of Empedius. Virgil had intended to become a lawyer as his father wished, but after arguing his first law case, he turned to study of philosophy, finding it more congenial to his temperament. And now let's move to Virgil's work. So the best known of three major works in Latin literature is the Euclides, the Georgics, and the Aeneid, although several minor poems also attribute to him, such as Collex, the Copa, and the Catalepton. So the Euclides, he began the composition of his first important work, which was published in 37 before Christ. The Euclides are 10 short poems in dactylic hexameter. It depicts the life and love of shepherds in idealized rural settings. They belong to the genre of pastoral poetry, and they're much concerned with the nature of worlds of plants, trees, flocks, and so on. However, the Euclides also have political themes. With the publications of the Euclides, Virgil achieved great popular success. Now that brings us to his second important work. The Georgics is a longer poem, 4 books of dactylic hexameters in the genre of didactic verse, as practiced by Hensoid in the Works and Days. Virgil undertook the Georgics not long after the publications of the Eaglegus. A didactic poem of over 2,000 lines, the Georgic about farming was completed in 30 before Christ. After 7 years of labor, during which time Virgil chiefly lives in Naples, the city he loved most. On one level, this work is about animal and agriculture methods. And this poem is dedicated to Mecaenas, and who was interested in reviving farming as a way of life for war veterans. On a deeper level, the Georgic celebrates the beauty and power of nature and stresses the importance of living harmony with it. Let's move on to the Aeneid. The Aeneid is widely regarded as Virgil's masterpiece and is also considered a national epic of ancient Rome and one of the greatest works of Latin literature. It composed in hexameters and began in 30 before Christ, then it finished around 90 before Christ. During the period, all of Rome, and especially the royal court, follows its progress. As he refined this work during his later years, the poem is dedicated to Augustus. He worked on this poem exclusively until his untimely death 11 years later. When the poem was substantially finished, meaning about 16 lines of which were left unfinished at his death. Shortly before his death, Virgil requested that the Aeneid manuscript to be destroyed, as he did not want to leave it on unfinished state. But Augustus, mindful of the genius work that would long outlive the passing of his empire, wisely countermanded the poet's wish. The emperor assigned two of Virgil's friends to edit the manuscript for publication, but he cautioned them not to make any poetic additions. The work, completed near the end of 18 BC, achieved immediate acceptance throughout the Mediterranean world as the definitive Roman epic. So, why it was written and when it was written. The Aeneid was written during the period of political unrest in Rome during the period of Emperor Augustus. It was written to praise Augustus by drawing parallels between him and the protagonist Aeneas. Virgil does so by mirroring Caesar with Aeneas and by creating a direct lineage between Augustus and Aeneas. So what is it about? It tells the story of Aeneas and the Trojan who fled the fall of Troy and traveled to Italy, where he became the ancestor of the Romans. So how did the Aeneid impact Rome and the world? The Aeneid is a powerful literature. It tells us a great deal about how the Romans saw themselves and their culture, and what it meant to be a Roman. In addition to appealing us as a timeless work of literature, it also has a documentary interest for present-day readers. In this light, it can be seen as an attempt to inculcate its first reader a reverence for the history of the Roman Empire and a love for traditional Roman virtues and Rome itself. Many of the law and customs that were so prized by Romans remain our own, and other achievements of Rome continue to affect us as well. For example, Roman architecture derived from Greek models but made more daringly massive and imposing because of Roman engineering genius, influenced the style of edifices that have followed them to our own time. Perhaps most important, Latin, in which the Aeneid was written, is the foundation of the modern Romance languages, notably French, Spanish, and Italian, now spoken in the countries that occupy the regions that were once part of the Roman Empire, and from which the English language is also derived from. So, these are the people who were Virgil's major influence. But the foremost influence of Virgil was Homer, the Greek poet who composed the Iliad and the Odyssey. By Virgil's time, Homer was acknowledged as the greatest of all poets, and Virgil studied Homeric epic poetry in order to develop his own artistic techniques. So, what style of writing did Virgil use? Virgil's writing style is that he wrote metrical verse, specifically in a meter known as dactylic hexameter. So, dactylic hexameter is a form of meter frequently used in ancient Greek and Latin poetry. The scheme of hexameter is what is shown on the slide, as you can see. And the hexameter is traditionally associated with classical epic poetry in both Greek and Latin, and was consequently considered to be the grand style of Western classical poetry. So let's talk about Virgil's impact on literature. He has been a great traditional literary influence, a great pattern of language, and a teacher of poets and the despair of translators. Virgil's poetry was exercising much of the same influence upon European poetry. As a whole, it had exercised on Latin poetry in the centuries immediately following his death. It was influence which was increased progressively as scholarships and the result of scholarships become more generally diffuse. Such as the Latin poetry, it was mainly a literary influence. Virgil's influence on English literature has been enormous. He was enamored as Spenser's constant inspirations for the fanciful beauty of the fair Queenie. The Aeneid was the model for John Milton's Paradise Lost, not only in epic structure and machinery, but also in style and diction. His poem became a school book within a few years of his death. He is one of the very few Latin writers whose work remained known without any break from the day that it was written until now. His genius was recognized in his own lifetime, onwards with very, very little questions. More than that, his text has been pored over, annotated, translated, and imitated from his own time to ours, sometimes chiefly for antiquarian reasons, but usually with an appreciation of its beauty and devotion. So let's talk about his impact on humanity. His literary works have been exercised and studied by a series of men of genius such as Ronsard, Milton, Racine, Dryden, Tennyson for the later generation because of his work is very complex and difficult to approach for normal people. The work of Virgil was preserved in honor and carried down intact to the age of humanism, when it could be studied anew with a more thorough understanding. It was one of the tasks of the greatest humanist educator to maintain the moral value of the great classical writers on to later generation. Virgil's comprehensive grasp of human knowledge, including ethics, politics, and metaphysics, had created a work of unique profundity and profound unity, celebrating the Roman Empire and its value and the merits of royalism and one-man rule. So his greatest work, the Aeneid, continues to be relevant today. It is still being read for two main reasons. First, Virgil expressed in powerful and beautiful language that humanity that we share with him over the centuries that separate us. The second reason, it forms a precious part of cultural heritage of modern Western civilization. Although the event described in the epic belong far more to the realm of myth and legend than to actual history, The poem gives us, for that very reason, an idealized picture of the way a great people wish to see themselves and their place in the world. Our understanding of their aspirations adds to our knowledge of our past. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Author and Roman. Table of content. First, we have introduction to the history, three the version for the conclusion. So first of all, we introduction. The first about the author. Bertrand Dupuis is the author of the book. He was born in 1135 AD, but we are not 100% sure about the date, but those are the rough estimate of his life, and we have not entirely sure, partly because we just didn't know a lot about his life. Most of what we know has been gleaned from his writing. The majority of what we have learned has come from the introduction to his work as well as from the work themselves, his writing style, and so on. His first name is Cloton, simply mean Christian in French, and so it's impossible that might be. He could have been raised in Brittany, a region in northern France near Great Britain or England that got its name from some of the same people group that used to live in England and migrate across the English Channel into the northern France, and this is likely where he picked up a lot of the other story and the French people began to pick them up, and the French people transformed them, as you may have. So it appeared they have added their own French twist to the story, and it appeared that quality, and because those was born and raised in the Brittany and may have first heard the other story there, and then later in his career when he was writing his draw on those other stories for some of the original tale. It is important to note that the speaker was not merely recurring story that he would heard. For instance, thought he was invent, and he did create some new story that he not been part of King Arthur legend before, and even some new character. For instance, the character of the Lancelot is the creation of the left-hand towards his come. The character of the Arthur and Lancelot are now very integral part of the other story. The invasion of the collection button is almost inseparable from it. So there is something new. It's not something that was in the other story before, but it has become an inseparable part of it. So that is basically all we know about him. We do not know a lot beyond those details because nobody really writing a story. I have been glad that tell his life, what we have gathered from his word, and another thing that we have gleaned from his writing. The brief summary of the book. Author and Roman is a collection of 5 stories written by Christian Dupuis during the 20th or 13th century, concerning the events surrounding the legendary King Arthur and survival of his knight. The story features many well-known characters as well as many allusions to story of King Arthur that are not included in the collection. Author and Roman complete many examples of the matter and habit of the time period, along with examples of the chivalry and honor. Term: protection of the maiden and lady. The protection of maiden is important term in the Arthurian Roman, as it was an important part of the knight code of chivalry and honor. Since the medieval times saw woman was innocent and weak. It was the duty of many honorable men, especially a knight, to preserve that innocence and provide them with protection. Each story in this collection demonstrate them term at last one. Second, the history, the Arthurian legend. The Arthurian legend is a group of people and that was originally from England and has migrated across the England Channel, Northern Frank, and they tell of the King Arthur and his knight of the Round Table. Now, originally medieval Roman is not all story about the Arthur and his knight. However, over time, because the Arthur story proven to be the most popular medieval Roman, over time the rest of those medieval Roman story begin to get incorporated into the Arthurian legend. So well, there was one of the other is the Arthurian knight read the story may have mentioned that in the past, but yet Tristan was one of the other is knight. Or you know, Eric was one of our first knight. Nobody mentioned that, but it was true. There was one of the knight of the Round Table, and so gradually the kind of group of knights who are part of the Round Table expands, so that by the time you get to the end of the medieval era, almost all of the medieval Roman stories have been incorporated somehow into the Arthurian legend, and almost all of the story of the knight have been created into the mystery. And the knight have been said to have been knight of the order. So one of the key kind of conflict in the Arthurian legend is the conflict between love and chivalry, and I mentioned earlier about how different knights even in the work of the collecting the tale deal with the conflict in a different way. Lancelot sacrificed his love and whichever story for story. If he did not sacrifice his life, he sacrificed his honor and the chivalrous story for the sake of his love. Whereas when sacrificed his love of the sake of his honor, and then Percival find a perfect blending of God's love and chivalric duty in his quest for his holy grail. Physically, Arthurian legend portrait knight on a variety of quote that has always been an important part of the Arthurian legend, but the Arthurian legend assumes the quote for the Holy Grail, but most of it was on the rest of the story. The part that's not a quote story, the part that is more about the Arthur and his family and his relationship. So that's an important part of our story and legend as well. But of the the research for the Holy Grail is of course the most popular. It is one that people keep coming back, and therefore it makes sense. It was the one the documentary include as part it kind of overview of the Arthurian legend. Read the version point of the view. The point of the view is the Arthurian Roman is the third person. The point of the view is the omniscient
obtained and relatable as the natural can report not only the action but the thought and feeling of all the characters in the collection. The point of the view allowed the reader to articulate much of the action that occurs because of having across to the emotion, thought, and belief of the character. The narrative is input also often alludes to the tone of the painting even by stating, for example, that Sir Gawain did not delay his danger, allowed the reader to infer and that an adventure is approaching the point of the view, providing the reader with more introduction than the individual character have. Quote, the present in his proverb said that one might find oneself holding in the content something that is worth much more than one belief. Therefore, a man does well to make good use of his learning according to whatever understanding he has, for his neglect his learning may easily keep silent, something that would later give much pleasure at an innate pace. 37.
Hello, professors and everyone. My name is Wayne. So today I'm going to talk about William Shakespeare. So here are the table contents that I'm going to talk about him. Now let's get into the topic. William Shakespeare was an English playwright, poet, and actor. Shakespeare was born on 26 April 1564. He is widely regarded as the greatest writer in the English language and the world's greatest dramatist. In 1613, the Globe burned down, and the same year Shakespeare retired from the London theatre walls and returned to Stratford. He died on 23 April 1616 and was buried in Holy Trinity Church, where he has been baptized 52 years earlier. So why is he so famous? Shakespeare was a prolific writer during the Elizabethan Jacobin ages of British theatre, and sometimes called the English Renaissance or the early modern period. Shakespeare's plays are perhaps his most enduring legacy, but they are not all he wrote. Shakespeare's poems also remain popular to this day. His extant works, including collaborations, consist of some 39 plays, 154 sonnets, 3 long narrative poems, and a few other verses, some of uncertain authorships. His play has been translated into every major living language and are performed more often than other of any playwright. He remains arguably the most influential writer in the English language, and his work continue to be studied and reinterpreted. Records survive related to William Shakespeare's family that offer an understanding of the context of Shakespeare's early life and the life of his family members. John Shakespeare, his father, married Mary Eden, and together they had 8 children. John and Mary lost 2 daughters as infants, so William became their eldest child. John Shakespeare worked as a glove maker. When he was 18, Shakespeare married Anne Hathaway, who was 26. It was a rush marriage because Annie was already pregnant at the time of the ceremony. And together they had 3 children. Their first daughter, Susanna, was born 6 months after the wedding and was later followed by twins Hamnet and Judith. Unfortunately, Hamnet died when he was just 11 years old. Shakespeare probably began his education at the age of 6 or 7 at Stratford Grammar School, which is still standing only a short distance from his house on Henley Street. Although he has no record of Shakespeare attending the school, due to the official positions held by John Shakespeare, it seems likely that he would have decided to educate young William at the school, which was under the care of Stratford's governing body. The Stratford Grammar School had been built some 200 years before Shakespeare was born, and at the time, the lessons taught there were primarily by the beliefs of the reigning monarch. Shakespeare is well known as a poet. Now let me tell you what his first poem is. Shakespeare's earliest poem was Venus and Adonis and the Rape of Lucrece were probably composed when the theater were closed because of the plague. Venus and Adonis, created in about 1592 until 1593 and first printed in the Quarto in 1593. And the Rape of Lucrece was created in about 1593 until 1594. Sonnet 18 is the most famous poem written by William Shakespeare and among the most renowned sonnets ever written. Sonnet 18 is so famous largely because its eloquent use of language and perfections of form. Furthermore, the three types of plays Shakespeare wrote are tragedies, comedies, and histories. Tragedies are often marked by death and sadness, while comedies include happy ending, and it's always ending with a wedding. Histories reflects a dramatizations of historical monarchs and periods of time from Shakespeare's perspective. Shakespeare's three best-known plays are Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, and Hamlet. Each one has an interesting stories and a movie adaptations. Shakespeare's three best-known plays are also all tragedies. Romeo and Juliet claims to the top spots in Shakespeare's three best-known plays. Romeo and Juliet remains one of Shakespeare's three best-known plays because of its enduring themes and the power of abstractions between the two main characters. Within the play, there are several memorable scenes that many people know even if they are not read or studied the play. That Shakespeare invented. William Shakespeare's contributions to English literature is indispensable. He's contributed significantly to the growth of English vocabularies and phrases, which have enriched the language, making it more colorful and expressive. Shakespeare is responsible for inventing, popularizing, repurposing, and preserving thousands of common words in the English language. His playful usage of language included combining two words to make one new word, changing verbs into adjectives, and changing nouns into verbs, and added prefixes or suffixes to words. What is his impact on humanity? Shakespeare's contributions to the theater is immense. He brought a new psychological realism and depth to drama and created hundreds of living, believable characters, all of them different individuals showing the rich diversity of humanity. 4 centuries later, we can still identify with their aspirations, their strengths, and their failings, and sympathize with their moral dilemmas. It is the truth to human experience that gives rise to comments like that of actress Janet Zoman. Shakespeare was a humanist in every hero. In an era preoccupied with religion, Shakespeare's plays and poetry are remarkably secular in subject matters and outlook, and Shakespeare seems to have been influenced by classicals and Renaissance ideas about the importance of reasons and of mankind and human individualism. Shakespeare's influence on art, literature, language, and the vast arrays of creative art has long been known and documented. He is the most read playwright in the Western Hemisphere. And the English language is littered with quotes and phrases which originated from his work. He is also the inventor of the iambic pentameter, forms of poetry that is still widely used today. The Renaissance English and almost of all Europe was awakened to understand the value of classic literatures and culture from the Dark Ages. English as a language was evolving, and what we now his writers' inspirations, readers' delights, and a modern look of golden material for a performing artist. Several of words, phrases, and quotable quotes in currency today are his contributions. He coined his life by contributing to the English literature, which made him brand himself. Shakespeare's work reflected the new political and societal discussions beginning in London. Popular works such as Arcadia by Sir Philip Sidney and Essay by Michael de Montaigne influenced Shakespeare's idea, while many of his plays were written during the Elizabethan age. Shakespeare's later work were written in the dawn, which emphasized the questioning of the social order. He examined how his social functions, how relationship was formed, and how religion influenced politics. For example, Hamlet was full of allusions of skepticisms about love and religion. And now I will talk about the inspirations of him to others. Modern writers, novelists, and dramatists are greatly influenced by Shakespeare's plays and writing. Shakespeare has greatly influenced authors such as Herman Melville, Charles Dickens, Thomas Dickens, and William Faulkner. Charles Dickens derived almost 25 titles from Shakespeare's work. He used many quotations from Shakespeare's in his work too. The character in the novel Moby Dick by Herman Melville were developing from the influence of Hamlet by Shakespeare. Many of Melville's writing have titles derived from Shakespeare's work as well. Most modern-day movie makers derive ideas and plots from Shakespeare's writing and reshape them into new scripts. Movies like She is the Stars and West Side Story was based on 12 Nights and Romeo and Juliet, respectively. William Shakespeare was well known in his time, and his legacy continues today. His language innovations, the multiple uses of his work and themes, and his play enduring popularity mark him as an undeniable influence on modern literature. Shakespeare's work are still studied and performed around the world, and writers will continue to find new ways to tell his stories and decades to come. William Shakespeare changed the English-speaking world forever by creating new words and tropes, as well as building relationship between writer and patrons. Shakespeare greatly influenced contemporary literature. Not only are actors still performing his plays, but his works, symbolism, workplace, and characters inspire contemporary writers to push their creative boundaries. This is all from my presentation about William Shakespeare. You can go to this resource to find more information about it. Thank you for your attention.
Greeting everyone, my name is Sidalis, and today I have the most famous literature written by Jonathan Swift, which is A Tale of Two. So let's begin with the table content. I'm going to talk about the introduction and then the plot of the story, and also including quotes. And I will explain how the author contribute to humanity. Also, the author have interact or influence with Martin OHM. And also, last but not least, will be the author and Martin perspectives, also the conclusion. Yeah, so for the introduction, A Tale of Two is well-known literature, which is argue his most difficult satire and perhaps his best, because the story conveying about the tale is a post-predony divided into a section of digression and a tale of three brothers, each representing one of the main branches of Western Christianity. And A Tale of Two comprised the tale itself, an allegory of the Reformation in the story of Brother Peter, Martin, and Jacques as they attempt to make their way in the world, along with word discussion interspersed throughout, and each brother representing one of the primary branches of Christianity in the West, and the brothers have inherited three wonderfully satisfactory codes by their father, and they have his will to guide them. And other the wills say that the brothers are forbidden from making any changes to their code. They do nearly nothing but alter their code from the start. And A Tale of Two was the first major work written by Jonathan Swift, composed between 1694 and 1697, and published in 1704. And its steady literature about a tale was long regarded as a satire on religion itself, and it has famously been attacked for it, and starting with William Warren, the tale present and consistent satire of religion excess, while the digression are a series of parodies of contemporary reading in literature, politics, theology, biological aesthetics, and medicine. And the overreaction paradise is a aestheticism, pride, and credibly, and at that time was written politics and religion was still linked very closely in England, and the religious and political aspect of the satire can often hardly be separated. And the other goal, as far as I can tell, is intended to distract hopes and other critics and of the church and government from picking hole in their weak point. For instance, the tale with its two appended the battle of the book and the discord concerning the mechanical operation of the spirit in Swiss, first impression post-work. And through the character of the literature, it seems like its real target is the adult. This is an incredible novel, especially for the youth. It's contained many moral lessons about life and self-actualization. Seeing this novel tell us about the meaning of life. When something bad happened to it, it's implicatedly contain many good quotation. So the next is the plot of the story. The main plot of the story is that a tale of two concerned three sons who interact code from their father with a common never to alter them, and in youth the brother are committed to obeying their father dying wish, but fashion changes and they begin to feel left behind by polite society, and they begin scrutinizing their father with to see if there can be any justification for altering the code after all. By twisting his word, they manage to rationalize the addition of decorative not and then of gold lace, and eventually of numerous other decoration. Each time they depart further and further from the obvious intent of their father will, until eventually they are not even pretending to consult it. Let's go with the quote, the interesting quote in the literature, which is for as hell is but one thing and has been always the same, whereas disease are by thousand beside you and daily addition. So all the virtue and that have been ever in mankind are to be counted upon a few fingers, but his fullness is and which are innumerable and time adds to the heap. So this means that others might envy or and value the talent that they cannot reach, but for which reason they must need bear a true honors to this large eminences. I hope this little passage will not be offensive to that ear, and since it has the advantage of being only designed for themselves without the smallest tincture of anything new, not only to the torment and nauseating of the Christian reader, but it's, if not suddenly prevented, to the universal spreading of that pestilent disease and lethargy in this island, whereas there is very little satire which has not something in it untouched before, and the defect of the former are usually imputed to the one of invention among those who are the least and decline, but I think with a great deal of injustice, the solution being easy and natural for the material of patriarch being very few of number and have been long since exhausted now, and to at most a poor poet can do is to get my heart is less of they may ring the change as far it will go. And when I get exhausted, time of hour must be so too. And the next quote is books like men, their author have no more than one way of coming into the world, but there are 10,000s to go out of it and return no more. So this means that, for example, when we have prepared a capriceless title to present your highness and an attributed argument for what I affirm, so that I can only evolve in general to your highness and we do above in learning and wit, and but it's fixed upon particular in attack to simply for my slender ability. If I should venture in windy day to affirm to your highness that there is a large cloud near the horizon in the form of a bear, another in with the head of an ass, a third to the western with claw like a dragon, and your highness should in a few minutes think with to examine the truth. It's contained there would be all changed in figures the position new one would arise, and all we could agree upon would be that cloud that were but I was grossly mistaken in this geography and topography of them. Next point is that how Swiss contribute to humanity. So in a letter to young gentlemen lately entered into Holy Order 1720, Swiss advised that the Christian mystery should not be explicated by divine, but should remain incomprehensible, for otherwise they would not be mysterious. And thought God-given human reason is not inflexible because of the interest, passion, and whims of the individual. He never professing to be a philosopher. Swiss will nevertheless serious thinker on the problem of religion, of morality. However, because of his pervasive use of irony, his writing is in this area have not infrequently been misunderstood, and Maclean Swiss always maintained and quite properly that he was not attack religion, but the corruption of excess of religion and the abuse of reason as dream he performed all the function of that office and was is very respect a Syrian Christian. I would like to explain about how the Swiss and Martin are interact or influence with each other. So like most of all of us, Swiss personality was surely made up of many part. One of this part like sympathize with the victim of his society, another consider pain and insecurity in the language and attitude of an oppressor. And the book is lined with controversy between Catholic and Protestant, Anglican and deserter, English and Irish, West and tourist. But if there is anything controversial in its presentation of Swiss position on this matter, a reader would not know its from its tone. Like if it's a pure fractionally more simplified text to high elegantary position than any other, and it's real that his is only because it's most focused on Swiss. And despite the script line background, the biography is far more historical than literature. There are no extended passage of criticism. This is not ripped Swiss work out of the history into which they are stretched. As a result, individual work are discussed briefly and repeatedly, whether they become relevant to history being described in what after an introduction starting in Medi Rest in 1710. and is broadly prognostical book. And A Tale of a Troop shocked all who weren't entirely confused by it. Swiss Bond, the personality that recognized and in their own way equal his as a person. And there's much intendo of Swiss Marine letter. As Golden by gentleman of fiction Martin Owen in 1835, the Greek also had observed that the golden ratio provided the most essentially pleasing portion of side of rectangle, a notion that was enhanced during the reign by, for example, the work of the Italian polymath Leonardo da Vinci. So about the perspective of Swiss and Martin Ohm, for Jonathan Swiss, to explore idea about critics, ration, action, and modern philosophy, discretion, and the nature of writing itself. The themes are all underscored with the satirical tone that take religious author and critics to task. And for the Martin Ohm, like Swiss other major prose, A Tale of a True was published anonymously, but unlike with those later works, Swiss was obsessively concerned with preserving the anonymity of his authorship of the tale, and his authorship of the tale was never publicly acknowledged in his lifetime, nor did it appear in the authorized edition of his collect work. But although Swiss maintained the fiction of anonymity in relationship to A Tale of a Tube, it's never at any point that he tried to suppress the book as a whole. He only tried to obscure his direct connection with it, but despite the fact that he was desperate that no one should ever know that he wrote A Tale of the Tube, he also seemed to have been extraordinarily proud of his satire. So last but not least, for the conclusion, I believe that literature is the foundation of humanity, culture, belief, and tradition, and it serves as a reflection of reality, a product of art, and a window of ideology. And everything that's happened with the society can be written, recorded, and learned from the piece of literature. And literature also develop in student critical and creative thinking skill and encourage students to draw link between global and local issues, and it's involved negotiating with others through collaboration and effective communication. And literature also a person who step back in time and learn about life on earth from the one who walked before us, and we can gather a better understanding of culture and have a greater appreciation of them. And we learn through the way history is recorded in the form of manuscript and through speech itself. As a group of educational discipline, the humanity are distinguished in content and method from the physical and biological science, and somewhat less decisively from the social sciences and the humanity, including the study of all languages and literature, the art history, and philosophy. So this is our reliable sources. And thank you for paying attention and listen to my presentation. Thank you.
So for today, I'm going to talk about the Romantic poet by William Wordsworth. First, we're gonna jump into his background. He was born on April 1770, Cockermouth, Cumberland, England, and died in April 23, 1850, Randalmount, Westmoreland. English poet who was orphaned at age 13. He attended Cambridge University, but he remained rootless and virtually penniless until 1795, when a legacy made a possible reunion with his sister Dorothy Wordsworth. He became friends with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, with whom he wrote a lyrical ballad, the collection often considered to have launched the English Romantic movement. Wordsworth's contributions include Turton Abbey and many lyrics controversial for this common everyday language. About 1798, he began writing the Prelude, the epic autobiographical poem that would assert him intermittently for the next 40 years. His second verse collection, poem in the two volumes, include many of the rest of his final work, including Intimation of Immortality. His poet is perhaps most original in its version of organic relation between man and the natural world, a vision that culminated in the swapping metaphor of nature as emblematic of the mind of God. The most memorable poem of his middle and late years were often cast elegant modes, show much the best of his early work. By the time he became widely appreciated by critical and public, his poetry had lost much of its force and his radical politics had yielded to conservatism. In 1843, he became England Poetry Laureate. He is regarded as the central figure in the initial of English Romanticism. So next we're gonna explore about the William Wordsworth poem. There are four of them. So the first one is I Wander Lonely as a Cloud. It's one of the most famous and best loved poems written in the English language. William Wordsworth, a romantic poet, first wrote it somewhere about 1804, but he later made a vision. The final, most well-known version of the poem was published in 1815. The poem is based on one of the Wordsworth's own stroll across the Lake District region in England. He and his sister came across a broad strip of daffodil on their world. This daffodil have a lasting impression on the speaker in the poem, both in terms of the first impression they leave and the second, in terms of how the memory of them persists over time. The classical romantic poetry, I Wander Lonely as a Cloud, combine fundamental concepts about creativity, humanity, and the natural world. Moving to the Composed upon Westminster Bridge, was written on September 3, 1802. The title identifies a specific location and period of history. A view of London River Thames during the Industrial Revolution is typical of the Wordsworth writing, which frequently explore the strength and the transience of remember moment. The speaker of the poem considered the city before dawn, appreciating its amazing beauty while understanding the force of industrialization that are altering it. The poem was published among sonnets that direct attack industrial England. Turtle Abbey, a poetry of thought, love, and loving recollection. Turtle Abbey demonstrates how over the course of the next 20 years, Wordsworth grew in his carefree early 20s and started to view nature through a different prism. He had a sister, Dorothy, whom he loved clearly and by his side during this poetry journal. She was married to a student who was under Wordsworth's instruction. Sadly, the young man passed away unexpectedly, leaving his sensitive brother, Wordsworth, and Dorothy devastated. The incident left a painful mental scar on the poet. Wordsworth frequently had Dorothy suffering on his mind. This poetry captured the painful memory of humanity. And finally, the last one is about My Heart Leap Up. A romantic poet wrote about little poem. According to diary, his sister Dorothy kept detailing their daily life. It was written on March 26, 1802, while Wordsworth was residing at Dovecote in Petcher Square. Lake District in the northern England. It was eventually published in 1807 as a part of Wordsworth's poem. In two volumes, the speaker of My Heart Leap Up expressed the excitement they give upon viewing a simple rainbow, which, like many of his works from this period, was inspired by nature. This poem also emphasized the value of maintaining a sense of wonder and enthusiasm from childhood throughout one life, a theme that Wordsworth frequently returned to his writing. And that is all of my presentation. Thank you.
Reading professor and my fellow classmate. My name is Jieta. For today's presentation, I'll be focusing on Western literatures. So this is my table of contents. It's divided into 4 important parts. There's biography, achievements, contribution toward humanities, and how she teaches us. Who is Virginia Woolf? Virginia Woolf was born Adeline Virginia Stephen on 25th January 1882. Woolf was born into an affluent household in South Kensington, London. She was homeschooled in English, classic, and Victorian literatures from a young age. From 1897 to 1901, she attended the Ladies' Department of King's College, London, where she studied classics and history and came into contact with early reformer of women's higher education and women's rights movement. Woolf began writing professionally in 1900. Throughout her life, Woolf was troubled by mental illness. She attempted suicide at least twice. Her illness was characterized by symptoms that today would be diagnosed as bipolar disorder. In 1941, at age 59, Woolf died by drowning herself in the River Ouse at Lewes. Achievements. During the interwar period, Woolf was an important part of London literary and artistic society. In 1915, she had published her first novel, The Voyage Out. The Voyage Out, published in 1915 by Doug Wolff. The birth of philosophy and science at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th centuries challenged how people had traditionally understood the world. This shift, combined with the human capacity for evil demonstrated during World War I, led many artists to believe that it was necessary to abandon traditional art forms and philosophies in order to create new and revolutionary work of art. Many of ideas to the modernist movement can be found in both works. Rather than having a fixed narrator with a fixed perspective, Woolf goes in and out of the minds of different characters, making unexpected connections that are not always clear or necessarily rational. Her best-known works include the novel Mrs. Dalloway, 1925, To the Lighthouse, 1927, and Orlando, 1928. Mrs. Dalloway, a fictional upper-class woman in post-First World War England. Many critics believe that in writing this novel, Woolf discovered her voice, which she refined in her subsequent novels. Her style was a reaction on the linear and determinist narrative style of much popular Victorian literature. To the Lighthouse. To the Lighthouse is a 1927 novel by Virginia Woolf. The novel centers on the Ramsay family and their visit to the Isle of Skye in Scotland between 1910 and 1920. The novel employs an unusual, powerful, and all-knowing narrator, with the plot unfolding through shifting perspective of each character's consciousness. Woolf's method of representing characters' thought process is lyrical paraphrase rather than a broad fragment. Because of the novel's unique presentation of omniscience narration, readers are challenged throughout the novel to formulate their own understanding and view based on subtle shift in character development, as much of the story is presented in unclear or even conflicting descriptions. Orlando. Orlando is a novel by Virginia Woolf, first published on October 1928. Orlando is a history of English literature in satiric form. The book describes the adventures of a poet who changes sex from man to woman and lived for centuries, meeting the key figures of English literacy history. Considered a feminist classic, the book has been written about extensively by scholars of women's writing and gender and transgender studies. She is also known for her essays, including A Room of One's Own. It's an extended essay by Virginia Woolf, first published in September 1929. In her essay, Woolf uses metaphor to explore social injustice and comment on women's lack of free expression. She writes of a woman whose thought had let its line down into the stream. As the women start to think of an idea, a god enforces a rule whereby women are not allowed to walk on the grass. Abiding the rule, the woman loses her idea. Contribution toward humanity. Given the era she comes from, women was always taught to be submissive in nature. They were taught to be at home and make peace with the fact that the breadwinner will always be that man in her family. In all stages of her life, she is by default under control of first her father and brothers and then her husband. Both steered the society by saying that even though a woman was obliged to follow the norms, she has the freedom to think. In the essay, she writes, "Lock up your libraries if you like, but there is no gate, no lock, no bolt that you can set up upon the freedom of my mind." Her belief in oppressive nature of society toward human did not end with one book. Almost every one of her books places her female characters in a moral quandary between what is right and what she desires. How she teaches us. Notice everything. Woolf raised her sensitive to the highest art form. She had the confidence and seriousness to use what happened to her, the sensory details of her own life, as the basic for the largest ideas. Accept the everyday. Woolf was always profound, but she was never afraid of the trivial. She was certain that her mental ambitions to love, beauty, and engage in big ideas were completely compatible with a love of shopping, cakes, and hats, subjects on which she wrote with almost unique elegance and depth. Be a feminist. Woolf wished desperately to raise the status of women in her society. She recognized that the problem was largely down to money. Women didn't have freedom, especially freedom of the spirit, because they didn't control their own income. Women have always been poor, not for 200 years merely, but from the beginning of the time. Thank you for your attention, and here's my resources.
Thank you, my friend, for your wonderful presentation. Moving into my presentation, today I'm going to talk about a famous American writer who was born on the 2nd of August, 1924, James Arthur Baldwin. In today's presentation, firstly, I'm going to brief about James Baldwin biography. Secondly, I'm going to talk about Baldwin's greatest work, including his books, essays, and plays. Then I'm going to talk about his achievements and how he contributes to the humanities. Last but not least, we're going to give a significant conclusion and the value of James Baldwin literature as part of the humanities. Next, we're going to talk about James Baldwin's biography. Jumping into his background information, he was born on the 2nd of August, 1924, and died on the 1st of December, 1987. James Baldwin's high school diploma from David Clinton High School. James Baldwin got his writing talent from his mother, whose notes to school were greatly admired by the teachers, and that her son also learned to write like an angel. The principal of the school was the first Black principal in the city, who recognized Baldwin's work and encouraged him in his research and writing pursuits, as did some of his teachers who recognized he had a brilliant mind. By 5th grade, not yet a teenager, Baldwin wrote a song that earned a New York mayor praise in the letter that LaGuardia sent to Baldwin. Baldwin also won a prize for a short story that was published in a church newspaper. Baldwin's teachers recommend that he go to a public library on the 135th Street in Harlem, a place that would be great for Baldwin and where he would make a deathbed request for his papers and effects to be deposited. By 1971, he had relocated to the south of France, but neither his style nor his writing has lost its vitality. Modern menswear has splintered off in varying, fantastic new directions, but Baldwin's scholarly look could be straight off a 2019 Gucci runaway. His thinking on race, social injustice, and America's role in the modern world remains prescient and timely. Baldwin remained an outspoken observer of race relations in American culture. He would branch out into other forms of creative expression, writing poetry and screenplays, including treatment for the autobiography of Malcolm X that later inspired Spike Lee's feature film Malcolm X. He also spent years as a college professor at the University of Massachusetts. Moving on to Baldwin's greatest work, he received praise for his article, novels, plays, and poems, among other genres. Go Tell It on the Mountain, his debut book, was launched in 1953. Years later, Time magazine listed it among the top 100 English language books produced between 1923 and 2005. Notes of the Native Son, his debut collection of essays, was released in 1955. In the face of complicated social and psychological forces, Baldwin fictionalizes essential personal issues and questions. Complex storylines are woven from the connecting theme of genders, sexuality, racism, and class in the middle of the 20th century in America, including the gay liberation movement and the civil rights movement. Gay and bisexual males regularly take center stage in Baldwin's writing, and his heroes are frequently, but not always, African Americans. In their quest for social and self-acceptance, these characters frequently encounter internal and external challenges. Giovanni's Room, Baldwin's second book, was written in 1956, years before the gay liberation movement, and featured a lot of these relationships. His legacy has persisted since his passing, and his work have been successfully adapted for the big screen. I Am Not Your Negro, a documentary that was nominated for the Best Documentary Feature at the 89th Academy Awards, is an enlarged version of the unfinished novel Remember This House. If Beale Street Could Talk, one of his books, was turned into the Oscar-winning Barry Jenkins-produced movie of the same name in 2018. The Amen Corner and Blues for Mr. Charlie are the best plays made by James Baldwin himself. For the novel section, The Fire Next Time, Giovanni's Room, Go to Tell It on the Mountain, Notes of a Native Son, Another Country, Nobody Knows My Name are the list of his famous novels, which spread globally because a fact about James Baldwin is that his literature and his essays are some of the frankest accounts of racism that his country has ever seen. He also wrote openly about homosexual and interracial relationships at a time when both were still illegal in his country. Lastly, Baldwin's body of work offers different point of entry to different readers that some of his essays, like Stranger in the Village, A Talk to Teachers, If Black English Isn't a Language, Then Tell Me What Is, Many Thousands Gone, How to Cool It by James Baldwin, blew up everywhere, especially in his country. Moving on to his achievement. On the slides, as you guys can see, these are a few of his greatest achievements. In 1945, he received $500 Saxton Fellowship from Harper & Brothers. Later in 1953, Baldwin's first novel, Go Tell It on the Mountain, was published. By 1954, Baldwin has been awarded the famous Research Fellowship. Then in 1959, he is awarded a 2-year Ford Foundation grant to compete in another country. In 1963, he wins the Polk Monument Award for Outstanding Magazine Journalism. Furthermore, at the year 1978, Baldwin is awarded the Martin Luther King Jr. Monument Medal. Baldwin's contribution toward humanities. James Baldwin is the voice of American civil rights movement, known for works including Notes of a Native Son, The Fire Next Time, Go Tell It on the Mountain. Baldwin's writing aided in educating the public about sexual and racial injustice. His open discussion of his personal experiences in a broader national context pushed America to uphold the ideas of equality and fairness it had pledged. In books like Go Tell It on the Mountain, Notes of a Native Son, The Fire Next Time, Giovanni's Room, If Beale Street Could Talk, and Another Country, he examined these subjects. Baldwin was certain that sexuality should not be rigidly classified and was of the opinion that it should be treated as a fluid concept. Baldwin acted as a change agent for the aesthetic and intellectual traditions in American society through his popularity and writing created both domestically and overseas. Okay, I have come into a conclusion, and I will give you guys a significant conclusion also about Baldwin literature work. To sum everything up, James Baldwin literature plays a big role in the humanities, especially in America. It spread awareness of sexual and racial injustice, including the gay and trans equality, Black civil and voting rights, etc. Overall, James Arthur Baldwin, perhaps the greatest essayist in the English language, matters because of his unconditional defense of humanity, even though he's not here anymore, but his work and legacy remains. And it will always help the humanity grows and make the readers understand about those kind of problems in the society. These are my alternative resources. And yeah, thanks for listening to my presentation.
So in conclusion, from what we have seen so far from all of our team members' videos, this study has shown and effectively information on right. We learn about the similarities and the differences between Eastern and Western literatures. And by carefully comparing the observations made by specialists in Chinese, Indian, Japanese, and Western literatures on concerning issues of the literary values, canon formations, and the concept of literature itself. And that's all. Thanks for your attention.